Raindrops falling on the street. I can't recall when I last saw the sun. Summer's just a memory, a faded piece of history. No one can remember.
Brought to you by Great Lakes Speed Shop. Make sure you go see Bud and the gang. It's getting close to race season, and this weekend, as this episode comes out, they have an open house on Saturday, March 2nd, I believe. It is this Saturday. Go check them out. Go talk to them. See what they can do for you and make you faster this season. Also, great sponsors of Woah in general, Carpy's Print Company, the lead sponsor of the Woah 25. Make sure you go see them. Get your wraps, awards, big checks. They do it all. I feel like every time I turn around, I see them doing something else that's super cool. RC cars. I know if you guys listen to the podcast, they're huge into the RC cars. And Close Racing Supply. Joel was a supporter since when we started getting supporters for Woah and sponsors. Go check them out. They have some of the best stuff you can get for your car in all of America. So they ship nationwide. So even if you're not in our little area over here and you can't stop by their shop, you can shop for them online. So get your cars ready. Season's coming soon. Speaking of the season coming soon, some great news, and I'm glad to have this guy on the podcast. It seems like the last couple weeks, the people that I wanted to have on have been rescheduled because great news. And ladies and gentlemen, maybe the new face behind Freedom Motorsports Park, Cody Egner. How's it going, dude?
Going well. Thanks for having me.
So, you've been around racing for, a little bit around Freedom. I guess before we even talk about you taking the reins and of Freedom and all of those good things, let's talk about, your background. How'd you get into the sport? What have you been doing that's led up to this moment?
So my entire family's been involved in racing since I was born. I didn't know anything different. Um, you know, Before I was born, one of my great uncle Pete's competed in one of the early Daytona races. My grandfather raced. My great grandfather was an engineer, and he crew chiefed for my great uncle Pete. And then getting into more recent days, my uncle Greg Oakes now fields a super late. So I started my racing ventures up on the hill at Freedom when he was racing the UMP mods and battling back and forth with some big stars up there. And then now my engagement is more on the crew chief level for him. And I try to head up being the crew chief of his super late model operation. Between that time frame, I did a little racing myself. I started out in the mini stock class when I was 16 years old and worked my way up from there to the center seating modifieds, the sportsman modifieds, and then made the jump right from that to a super late model. So big jump. It was a lot to learn, but a good time. And yeah, it was a fun while it lasted. Maybe one day I get back into it, but definitely stepped into some different roles within the racing industry. So, I'm pretty happy where I'm at right now.
So we've worked together around Freedom. I took over doing photo duties last year, and then all of a sudden we turned around and actually had our first ever hosted race. In what, about a 2-week span that we turned around and went from Bob calling me and going, "Hey, I know you said next year, but and that turnaround, that was a great opportunity working with you and kind of learning way more behind the scenes. I would hate to say that when I got in there, I thought, oh, how hard could this be? And then I realized, working with you, working with Kyle, Redneck Race Chaser, and all the people behind the scenes, even doing lap money. Insane, guys. I just want everybody to know there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Cody's a big part. So up until this, what has your role been at Freedom before, taking this gig?
So, if you guys attended Freedom, you see me back working the pit band. It started by, needing some assistance there. I seen Bob needed a hand and kind of reached out and said, "Hey, I'm interested in doing something like this." So started off kind of basic, just being there to, sell pit bands at the back, making sure that, people were getting in the gate quickly, being there for a resource for our pit steward, Heath, if he needed something, pushing some sprint cars on sprint car. And then we got engaged with the concession stand and that program, to really try to drive some efficiencies home there. So it's kind of gotten more and more as we got engaged, and then starting into this new general manager role, it's all hands on deck, if you will. We're right into the scheduling of the season, and orchestrating marketing partners, and facility improvements. It's getting onto that, which we'll get into that through the interview, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I'm really excited, and I do a lot of these callbacks throughout, my podcast. I feel like every podcast, has, a general theme, whether they're, whether people think they're good, bad, ugly, or amazing. One of my favorite interviews that we've done, and it was very early on, is with Marty, who used to be with Rush, now with the CRSA Sprint Cars, doing their PR and announcing. We talk about getting a lot of young people in the sport, and I think what really, with freedom, you're a young buck in the grand scheme of things. Even though you've been around racing forever, we talked about this big gap, and slowly and surely, people taking over, but people that if you're interested in getting behind the scenes, do what Cody did. Sell pit bands. See if anybody needs help, get out there. So
Yeah.
going into the GM role, a lot of things to talk about there. But I mean, what all are you going to be responsible for this season and seasons onward?
So it started off with developing our schedule. I touched base with Bob, and I kind of reviewed some of the financial information that we had last year, and really took a dive into what works well for the facility and what doesn't. So it started off with our scheduling. We've since released the schedule, and I've got some information to review on that. But then it's going to transition into our marketing strategy and advertising. I'm very blessed to have Kyle Windsor in my corner for that. Him and I have been on the phone this past week for 12 plus hours. He's been a great support, and I mean, just his support to the racing industry alone, we all should be extremely thankful for him. But myself particularly, he's been right there to answer any calls, texting back and forth, shooting ideas. I actually was able to, because he's local to the racetrack, get him to go up there with us and show some of the stuff that he sees from his perspective. He's more than just a fan. He's the videographer, if you will, for all of motorsports in our area. So he kind of sees it from the fans' lens, and he was able to provide some good information there. So it's the marketing, the advertising. It'll be day of operations, making sure that our concessions are flowing smoothly, our beer operations are going smooth, ticketing, making sure that the event is on pace, and we're going to get completed before our time limit there. We got a 11 o'clock curfew, so making sure the show gets done by then, and then ultimately just supporting the staff throughout the night. If there's a hiccup that comes along the way, be there to be of support.
And you talk about scheduling and all, you're going to be running around like crazy during race nights and, all week, getting the word out and things like that. But we talked about the schedule. Maybe a little controversial. I will say when I saw it come out there, there are some critics, but hey, I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute about, I feel like, out of all of the racetracks, I think we all agree that the internet is one of the most brutal places for, racing.
It is.
Myself included, because we run, Woah Nelly, and it's not like we ignore everything. We see what's going on. Maybe, the schedule, I thought it was exciting, having not just the Empires back again, but doing a 305 race, just trying some different stuff. And I think it's very exciting. I know I said it on our Facebook. If you give it give them a chance, it's going to be a great night for y'all. But going on that, what kind of goes into the ideas behind scheduling and trying something different? Because it felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, for the last couple years, it kind of seems like Freedom's trying to refine its identity. What
I
what is
would certainly agree with that. In the past few years, we we started off bringing big blocks in as our premier division, and then we went to super late models, and then we went to the crate late division, and it's really trying to find that. But Dan, what stood out to me is last year we had the ESS sprint cars, and we really hit it hard with the marketing and everything like that. And I think that our marketing presence was probably a little bit more, to touch quickly on the internet thing. It's the track's best friend, but it's also their worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
We rely so heavily on internet and social media to advertise our upcoming events and get people in attendance. But on the same contrary, a bad night or a post that someone disagrees with could ruin the rep. But getting back to the scheduling, it was really apparent to me after our ESS Sprint special last year. We had a record-breaking crowd. It was the largest in Freedom history. I think the number was right around 760 people that we had in attendance. And it was the first week that we had introduced some firework displays. The show was just amazing. The sprint cars put on a phenomenal show. And then the next week we go back and, we hit advertising equally as hard, but we had 217 people in attendance. And a racetrack can't sustain that if they're dropping over 500 people between weeks, so that to me said, hey, we need to take that data for what it is, because on our weekly races, we've seen that trend. We've seen a lower attendance, and we need to get rid of it, and it sucks to do that because it doesn't help support a local racing presence. But ultimately, every time we had the super lates there, every time we had the UMPs there, anytime we had the sprint cars there, attendance just skyrocketed. So, our area relies heavily on special events, and that's where we came up with the idea of the 8-race schedule. We have the super late models there 5 times this year. We were lucky enough to be able to do that. We've got the ESS Sprint Car Touring Series back. We're bringing in the Allegheny Sprint Car Series for our Fall Classic. We're going to have them back-to-back days, as well as super late models back-to-back. We've got the UMP mods 3 times in attendance, and we're bringing the big/small blocks back for another show. So I'm really excited for this year. With the class structure that we've got in place, it takes away from the point fund and trying to keep a good, strong weekly presence, to keep a good show for the fans. And now we're able to bring in a couple different divisions. It's always changing, and I think that helps fan attendance.
Yeah, I think doing a little bit of everything, a variety, is really good. And touching on the sprint car thing, we don't get sprint cars out here very often. So I mean, people will just absolutely pack that place. And I mean, down here, and I'll be one to admit that I don't really follow a lot of sprint car racing. Until it comes through the area and who's who, and
Right.
so it's very exciting, and having them just right next door is always good. I mean, if you look at when State Line had the All-Star sprints there, now that they're not around anymore, but when they did have them, they just had sprints and supers, and that place was probably more full than I've seen it, other than World of Outlaws or what have you. So I mean, it's a good choice to do sprint cars. But going back on hitting social media, and it's not something that we aren't aware of, that Freedom, as of the last couple of years, it seems like it's been a very brutal place on the internet. A lot of negativity, it seems like. And it's all of racing. It seems like no one's ever happy. Sometimes I ask myself, does anybody even like showing up anymore? I guess kind of counteracting that. What do you think going forward? And I'm sure the reputation of what the racetrack is to the locals, the loud critics on the internet. What do you think is the strategy going forward to kind of win back the popular opinion? Because I felt like when I first got back into racing, Freedom was a place that it was jumping. There were people there. Weekly shows. It seemed like a pretty good place to be, until the last couple years. It seems a lot of Debbie Downers, maybe some not so great things have happened, X, Y, and Z. What do you think the strategy should be going forward to kind of redeem the track, I guess, in the light of the popular opinion, if you will?
Yeah, no, I think some of that negativity stems towards the rainouts that have happened at the racetrack. It's no secret that we have canceled some shows, and maybe they were mistakes, maybe they weren't. But to touch on that, the racetrack's financial status is so driven off of the attendance of fans in the stands that it needs it to succeed. And the problem being is there's so much that people can go and do now that it pulls them away from, wanting to go there and maybe sit in the parking lot for 20 minutes while it rains. They'll go, maybe they'll go to the store, grab a case of beer, have a fire out back and put on Flow and watch a streaming race instead, where they know that they don't have to worry about that chance of it raining or something to that nature. So I think that that's where a lot of the issues stem from. Obviously, I'm going to try to combat that. We're going to try to, push as hard as we can, but ultimately we can't have these guys show up and then cancel on them and then, look to see when it might best fit them, because we went through and with the schedule, we tried to work it with other local racetracks where we weren't stepping on anyone's toes. Well, if we have to start rescheduling, then we're going to start stepping on people's toes. So, I think that we'll try to be a little bit more critical when it comes to the decision of, rainouts or cancellations. But, I think that it's important for the fan base to know that, it's truly dependent upon what we anticipate the grandstand attendance being to make those decisions. And I think truly that's probably where a lot of the negativity stems from the racetrack. So what's our way of addressing that? I think being a little bit more aggressive with our calling, try to take that chance every once in a while, where it's not going to be too much of a risk. Maybe there's some sponsor backing that says that we're okay if we have a little bit less of attendance, being able to take that chance. So trying to establish all of that so we're able to do that. I think really showing the racing community and our local, fans, the racing that goes on at the racetrack, because I know I'm partially biased, it's my hometown track, but I do believe that Freedom puts on some of the best racing around. We've had finishes that were neck and neck coming off of turn 4 and it was a photo finish. I think that there's a lot of that racing that goes on. A lot of times it gets to be 2-lane, especially with big motored cars there, UMPs, super late sprint cars. We get to see a lot of 2-3 wide racing. So making sure that they're aware of what's going on in their backyard, making sure that they're aware that the racing there is strong and it's clean and it's not hard on equipment, things like that, making the drivers aware of what's going on so we can get some more driver attendance. I think it'll be reaching out to drivers, trying to push that. I think the more big names that you bring to the facility, the more the fans are going to want to come. People will come to see local people that are strong in each division. When you can bring in a Dave Hess and a Dave Scott and a Rich Michaels to a UMP show, you got some big name guys coming in, Joel Watson, things like that. If we can pull those guys to come participate in our events, that's going to draw fans to the stands. And it's the same with the super late models and the sprint cars, so, really trying to reach out and grab a driver's presence. And then, finally just getting the fans involved, trying to get creative with maybe some halftime shows or, something to go along with that to, really get their engagement, different reasons for them to come to the track, because some nights the racing might not be great. Let's face it, a hot night, it might make for some slicked up 1-lane racing. But if there's a fireworks display or, there's a band at the end or something like that, that gives them another reason, like, yeah, maybe the racing wasn't great tonight, but the facility put on a good show nonetheless. I think that's important. So trying to bring all that into it is really how I'd like to go about combating that negativity and just let people know that, we're trying to make the best decisions possible to make sure that this place is in existence for future years.
Yeah, especially with those rainout calls, it's a hard
It is.
thing, especially around here. There's some racetracks around here that are just like full send. They'll run in the racetrack for 4 hours and we'll get it in. And how many people
And I think
are
we all
going to
love
be?
the guy that does that. I think we all know who you're referring to, and really he's just a genuine guy who really puts it all on the line for them. And I'll say it straight up. I've sat in State Line's parking lot waiting for them to put on a show, and Jim is consistent, and he says he's going to do it, and he does it. So hats off to State Line and their track prep crew for being able to do that. For us, we don't have as much of a local fan following, so it's a little bit, riskier to take that bet and see if the fans will stay there. But, hats off to them guys for doing that. And the other thing I want to touch on is when you go on a weather service, if you look at more than just one, know that you're going to see 6 different things, and the rain's going to come at different times and different percentages and all that. So, the weatherman, I joke around, the weatherman's the only guy who can be wrong and still have a job consistently, so.
Yeah, touching on when State Line had that 2 years ago, that super show, it's funny, I was actually shooting a wedding. I thought I wasn't even going to make it. And I want to tell you that when I was hauling, I was going all these back roads trying to get to State Line. I made it for qualifying, and that was one awesome racetrack too. But I mean, I've been at racetracks, even Hidden Valley right at the end of the year when they took the chance. They ran their big, end of the year October show, which, I mean, come on, you're running a big show at the end of, in October. That's a huge thing too. It was great. They got the show in. I enjoyed myself there. It's one of them things, but also going back, and you talked about names there. You covered a lot. It was crazy there. I was trying to hold on. But there was a couple of points I wanted to say is when we ran our UMP show there at Freedom last year, and it kind of showed me that kind of like UMPs are starting to, come back, because I know back in the day that was Freedom, that was the thing. Around here, that was the thing.
Right.
But, guys, when I was, promoting, talking to people in the crowd and stuff, they were like, here for David Scott and Dave Hess and, the guys that we know. And then you have, was it David Scott, Slow Ride Battle and, Zach Johnson. They got together, got to the back anyways. But people were starting not only to know the big names, but they were starting to become fans of, the Johnsons and all the, the comers and goers. It was a phenomenal race. Dave Hess, Hard Charger, also won the race. Great race. I might be biased too to Freedom, but I think it'll be an exciting year. A lot of different stuff. Check that out. Check out all local racing, but Freedom, they're opposite. You guys worked really good with McKean. Kind of got glad that you guys worked that. Sharing Fridays, I think it'll benefit both tracks to do that.
Yeah, we have to thank Kurt and Bonnie Stebbins for doing that. They shared with us what availability they had, and what nights that the fair board said that they couldn't race, and truly we tried to make sure that that's what we were capitalizing on, because they're, I know that they're trying to put on the weekly racing and still, and we hats off to them guys for doing that, and we thank them for sharing with us so that way we weren't stepping on their toes. And we encourage all of the people that support our racetrack to support theirs when we're not racing. I think that that's important too.
It's good, and it's local. So if you're not going to McKean, hop on over the hill, go to Freedom. On Friday nights that we weren't, home at Freedom, we felt 2 hours away in Ohio doing Raceway 7. So, it's a little easier for me when we're off on a Friday that we're, at a different Friday night local track. So, Cody, thanks for your time, man. I know you have to skedaddle. You got to get out of here, and hopefully that weather calms down. We'll see you during race season. You got thank all the sponsors for Freedom and everybody that makes Freedom happen.
Yeah, we're still working on our sponsorships right now, but there's a couple that have recently, solidified with us: JRM Equipment, Briggs Transport, Iron Listings. We're still working to get a couple more going on, but we'll have a more defined list. Just keep an eye on our social media page for announcements and everything. One thing with our sponsorship package, we're going to be doing some monthly publishing, so everyone will know where we stand with our marketing partners. We're welcoming new ones all the time. Thank you, Dan, for what you're doing for, not only our racetrack, but everyone else. I think this is an awesome thing that you're doing. And, thank you again to Kyle Windsor, with the Redneck Race Chasers for what he does. And all of our fans that come in and are diehard Freedom fans, we appreciate them as well. So, it was great to get on here. I appreciate it. And, I look forward to seeing you guys throughout the season, and hopefully, we all have successful 2024 racing seasons.
Can't wait to get at it, especially August 10th up there on the hill for the Woah 25. Thank you for joining us.
We're excited for that Mod Mania.
We will see you guys next week. Thank you for joining, Cody.
Thank you.
All the fun, the late night barbecue, zipping on a genie juice.